Hello and welcome to another Anfield Watch video. Today we're going to be talking about Liverpool's prospective left backs ahead of this summer's transfer window. And to do that, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Anfield Watch writer George James. George, welcome to the show. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, yeah. Despite the cup final loss and crashing out of the Champions League, I think that things are still looking good at Anfield.
Yeah, and obviously the league title is probably on the way. I don't want to jinx it just yet, but it looks like 12 points ahead in the title race. Liverpool are going to pull that off, or it would take a miracle for them not to pull it off. Which kind of brings us ahead to the summer, really, because right now it feels like Liverpool are out of the Champions League. Liverpool didn't win the Carabao Cup. All the focus seems to be on the summer, and everything points towards it being a massive summer ahead for Liverpool.
Absolutely. I think that sort of the last few summers we've seen have been maybe disappointing for some fans, but definitely not sort of rebuild levels, and that's kind of what you need now at Anfield. Especially you look at the contract situations of not just the three players that everyone knows, but beyond that there are contracts that will be expiring over the next few years. I think that Slot hasn't really had a chance to make this his team yet, and we'll definitely see that this summer.
So obviously we're going to be talking about left backs in this video, but it's important to note that so much of what Liverpool are going to do, even when it comes to left backs, is going to depend on who's going to be leaving from that trio of players you mentioned, and other players as well, because Liverpool are going to be in the market for a striker. They could potentially be selling Darwin Núñez, Diego Jota, and Luis Diaz, which Anfield Watch revealed exclusively. It was a big Sam Maguire exclusive for us last month. So there is so much that could be happening at Liverpool. It almost feels like this left back situation is kind of like secondary, but from what we do know, Liverpool do want to sign a left back, and that is a primary area where Liverpool want to strengthen.
Yeah, I think that sort of if it wasn't for the contract situation, maybe the left back spot would be higher up in everyone's thinking. I feel like a lot of the times when I watch Liverpool play, you know, that left back spot is definitely one that it looks like that is an area that we can improve on pretty much throughout the season. That has been the one area. I think the forward line now is also starting to maybe look like it's losing its legs a bit. But yeah, left back, I think, has definitely almost gone under the radar a bit as a big need for Liverpool this summer. And it's a position that we haven't really strengthened in for, you know, almost half a decade now. So it is definitely something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And I think that there are some great options for Liverpool to explore this summer.
Yeah, and that brings me to the names, potential players being linked. I mean, one of the biggest sort of names being linked is Milos Kerkez, who I've interviewed in the past, and I've also interviewed Richard Henty on this YouTube channel about his sort of career. Richard was his former youth coach and he's still very close to him, so do check that video out. But sort of about Kerkez, for me, everyone is talking about him. And I think what everyone sort of seems to sort of gloss over is the transfer fee that is being sort of discussed with him, because 50 million or around that is what Bournemouth want for him. Last summer, that was around 40 million. Manchester United were interested. Man United couldn't afford that. They didn't want to pay it. Is there a question mark that at 50 million, that is perhaps too much for Liverpool, given all of the other transfer sort of stuff that Liverpool also have to sort out?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a fee that Liverpool could afford if they thought that Kerkez was definitely their man. I mean, we've seen Liverpool go out and break the world record transfer fee for a defender to sign Virgil van Dijk. They're not afraid to spend the money on a player they know is going to improve them and is going to help them compete for the next 5-10 years. And Kerkez, I think, could be that player. I'm not 100% sure that Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes think he is this summer. So that fee could definitely be a sticking point. I mean, again, we said it before, it comes back to all the other business that Liverpool have to do. You know, if they can get that done fairly cheaply, then maybe 50 million for Kerkez does become more appealing. But it's definitely a big fee for a player who has really impressed this season. But isn't necessarily, coming in and going to be that world class, best in the world in his position straight away, like someone like Virgil van Dijk or Alisson Becker were when Liverpool splashed up big money to sign them.
Yeah, I think when I watch Kerkez play, what I see is a lot of potential, a lot of exciting things. Like, he just bombs forward. He's got so much energy, which I know Arne Slot would love. That sort of, I think it was against Newcastle when he went, or like it was the 90th minute, and he just charged up the pitch to score or get an assist. I can't remember exactly, but he just sort of, he looked like he was completely knackered, like almost Dominic Szoboszlai when he collapsed on the field against Manchester City. But then from somewhere he found this new wave of energy. Bournemouth went on the counter attack, and he ran literally the half a length of the pitch to get there and get a goal contribution in that game. And I think that summarizes really Kerkez as a player, because he's got all of that energy and everything else.
Yeah, I think that Kerkez's attitude on the pitch definitely lines up with what Liverpool are looking for. I mean, he is hardworking, and that, I think, more than anything else under Slot has been the key thing for these Liverpool players. I mean, especially with maybe a lack of rotation this season, and that might be down to Slot not having as many options as he wants, but the players need to work hard in this Liverpool side, and I think Kerkez, has shown this season at Bournemouth that he's willing to do that, and that would translate very well over to this Liverpool team.
I think maybe what I get sort of question marks about Kerkez, having watched him for a long time and being Hungarian, so seeing him in the national team, is he's got so much exuberance and energy. I do wonder when sometimes he can be maybe a little bit rash defensively. And I think maybe that might be the only sort of question mark about him for Liverpool, because going forward, he's got the quality, he's got those crosses, he's got the speed, he's got the energy. But for me, defensively, if you're maybe trying to keep a high line or trying to be a little bit more disciplined, that's where I think Kerkez is not really at the level that sort of Andy Robertson was maybe in his prime.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that Liverpool fans have seen a lot, the criticism of Trent Alexander-Arnold over the last 6-7 years, that offensively, Trent has been one of the best players in the world, but defensively, he has left a little bit to be desired at times. And I think that Kerkez could be sort of a similar situation. But like you said before, I mean, he's got so much potential. He's so young that there's nothing to say that Slot wouldn't be able to turn him into a more well-rounded player who can defend as well as anyone else, really.
Now, one player who I think can definitely defend, is Jorrel Hato, who has actually recently visited Anfield earlier this year. I believe he was invited by Ryan Gravenberch to watch a game at Anfield during sort of Ajax's winter break, or I'm not sure what they call it in the Netherlands, but they were definitely on a break. And Hato decided to come to Anfield and sort of see what the vibe is about, the atmosphere is about. And ever since then, there's been a few reports linking him to Liverpool. What do you make of those links? And obviously, he's a completely different profile to Milos Kerkez, but is he perhaps more suited to this style of play by Arne Slot?
Yeah, I think Hato's a name that really, really excites me. And again, he's so young, and that is maybe something to consider, but he just looks like a player that could be moulded perfectly by Arne Slot over the next few years. I mean, that Dutch connection, if Virgil van Dijk is to stick around for a few more years, there's no one really that you would want to nurture Hato if he were to come to Anfield. And yeah, he's a very different profile to Kerkez, and I think to Robertson and Tsimikas as well. But it's been clear at times this season that Robertson and Tsimikas aren't maybe the perfect left back for Slot. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Liverpool maybe move away from that type of fullback and really sort of double down on someone who is properly defensively capable, especially if Trent Alexander-Arnold's going to stay. That could really free him up on the right-hand side. And I think it's sort of a really exciting prospect.
Absolutely. And I think what really excites me about Hato is he can play that centre-back role, although I'm not 100% sure if he's sort of tall enough to play that in the Premier League on a regular basis. but he has got that ability to play as a centre back. I think he looks up to Virgil van Dijk as his sort of role model. So that is also encouraging in terms of, Liverpool thinking, do they have a chance of getting him? He definitely likes Virgil van Dijk, and I think there was a really interesting clip of him when he sort of met Virgil van Dijk for the first time. He was just starstruck by his presence, and I think all of these things, and the fact that he is close to Ryan Gravenberch's sort of entourage as well, means that he would definitely welcome a move to Liverpool. But for me, I think if I do raise some question marks, is perhaps, is he necessarily the kind of offensive fullback that Liverpool need? Offensively, does he have the qualities that a sort of a Kerkez or a Robertson in his prime delivers? And even if we're looking at Slot's sort of final team, he always used to have offensive fullbacks. Is Hato enough of an attacking threat?
Yeah. And that is the big concern, I think, with Hato. Maybe that, and also his price. He's another one who would cost a lot, but he's 19 and already a regular for Ajax. He's played 5 times for the Dutch national team. I think that there's that potential's there to get the most out of him and to help him contribute in the attack. And like we said before, this isn't just a window where Liverpool are looking for a new left back. Liverpool could have a completely different attack by the end of the window, and maybe you sacrifice some of the chances and some of the assists from the left back position and bring in Hato, who shores up your defence, and then you replace that kind of in the aggregate with the new attackers that you're going to bring in, and you rely on them more to create the chances. And I think that sort of, if Liverpool do want to stray slightly away from the very attacking fullback model that they've used previously for the last decade, really, I think that this window is the perfect opportunity to do it. And I mean, the defence has looked great at times this season under Arne Slot, and you do feel like an addition like Hato that could really solidify it. I mean, Liverpool could look impenetrable with Hato in the back line.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I think you mentioned the front line, but we also got to mention the back line and the future of Trent Alexander-Arnold. Obviously, Real Madrid have been heavily linked with him, and I think bringing in Hato would open up the possibility of Liverpool replacing Alexander-Arnold with a completely different profile of an attacker. Maybe someone even as offensive as Jeremy Frimpong, although I'm not necessarily massively a huge fan of that idea, but just someone of a different profile, like maybe even a sort of Conor Bradley type who will not sit back, but who will just bomb forward. And it gives Liverpool a sort of new dimension when it comes to their fullback area, which maybe if you're bringing in a Milos Kerkez, you won't really get.
Yeah, and I think that you touched on it before, Hato's ability to play as a centre-half as well, whilst maybe you wouldn't want to rely on him at centre-half, that dynamic allows you to almost switch into a back three in the middle of matches. And we've seen Ryan Gravenberch play as a centre-half at times this season as well. I think his ability to drop back into that back line, I think that the addition of Hato makes that back line so dynamic that it does just give you so many options, and it would really allow Slot to be able to play, and I think makes us a lot less predictable. Whereas, for the last 5 years, we've done what we do very well, but everyone sort of knows what you're expecting from Liverpool's backline every single game. Whereas I think Hato, allows you to switch that up a bit, and maybe against different opponents, you want to do different things, but he's definitely a very dynamic candidate for the left back spot.
Moving on, another player who is very young, would probably cost quite a lot of money, is Lewis Hall, who's at Newcastle. He's been at England through all age groups, and he's also come through Chelsea's academy. And we know players from Chelsea's academy tend to do all right at Liverpool. Anfield Watch dropped an exclusive last month where we revealed that he is someone who Liverpool like, who Liverpool scouts have been impressed with him. They kind of see him in the same mould as Andy Robertson, and I think when we're going to talk about a couple more players, but for me, Lewis Hall is the player who's sort of closest to Andy Robertson in his style of play. He has had a few sort of injury niggles in his career so far, but it is early days. He is still very young. But when he has played for Newcastle and when he has been on the pitch, he has been really impressive.
I think he is that sort of ready-made Andy Robertson replacement. I think he's got the Premier League experience. Again, Kerkez has that, but Lewis Hall has that in a maybe a slightly better side than Bournemouth. And I think that he is, like you said, probably the closest to, if you are just looking for a like-for-like Andy Robertson replacement, Lewis Hall's your guy. And the price, again, could be an issue because Newcastle aren't going to want to sell to a rival, and there's a number of Newcastle players that are constantly linked with Liverpool moves, and you do kind of feel like Liverpool are probably going to only be able to get one or two of them. So if Hall was part of that, does it maybe limit your options elsewhere on the pitch? But I mean, he's already played over 50 times for Newcastle. He looks like the real deal. I think when you look at the England picture for the next 5 years at least, Lewis Hall is probably going to be the man that takes that claims that number one spot at left back for England. And I think he is, again, a very bright prospect and someone that I'd be excited to see arriving at Anfield.
Yeah, I think we can mention Alexander Isak's name in this conversation. He's obviously the other Newcastle player who Liverpool have been heavily linked with. And I think the same will apply to Hall that applies to Isak. And I think this only really becomes a possibility for Liverpool is if Newcastle don't make the Premier League. Like, if Newcastle don't make the Premier League, what am I talking about? Champions League. If Newcastle don't make the Champions League, then this becomes a real possibility for Liverpool. And the PSR sort of regulations will come into play. And I think Newcastle are a team that are decent, but they will be looking to invest heavily in the market. And because of PSR, they know they probably need to sell a couple of players, get some big sales in order to bring in and rebuild the squad and restructure the squad to be a much better team in the future. So at this stage, they're still kind of like a selling team where they rely on big sales because of PSR to get everything over the line. And I think that is why if Newcastle miss out on the Champions League, then Liverpool have a genuine chance of getting Lewis Hall.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool fans will know that Michael Edwards is the ultimate opportunist, and we've already seen that a bit with Richard Hughes as well, signing Chiesa last summer. And this does just feel like one of those opportunities. I mean, how many times have we heard, Liverpool will move for the right player if the right opportunity arises? And you do just feel like if Newcastle don't qualify for the Champions League next season, that is that opportunity. I mean, maybe that knocks the price down a little bit and you are getting a Champions League quality left back. And yeah, that feels definitely like the move that Liverpool could make. And that is, I think fits very well in the sort of Michael Edwards type of signing that we've seen so many times at Anfield over the last decade. And I think that is something that sort of you do have to consider.
Absolutely, he is one to watch. And sort of moving on to, I think we discussed 3 players who have sort of everyone will have heard of. This fourth name is perhaps someone who maybe not everyone has heard of, but we at Anfield Watch understand that Liverpool are looking at him, and that is Maxim the Cuyper, who plays for Club Brugge. He's a Belgian international, and he has been very impressive in the Champions League, particularly in the first leg against Aston Villa, where I think he won 10 duels, and Arne Slot, we know he likes players who win duels, so that will have stood out for him. But in general, he is a very creative player, ranks very highly for expected assists in Europe's sort of outside the top 5 leagues, Europe's top 10 other leagues. He ranks very highly for expected assists and those creative numbers, and also covers a lot of ground. So if we're looking at sort of Champions League players, I think he ranks in the top 5 for distances covered this season in the Champions League. Again, we know Slot loves a player who runs a lot. That is why Dominic Szoboszlai continues to play, and that is why Ryan Gravenberch has been so influential in this Liverpool team as well. So the Cuyper is maybe a name that not many people will have heard of, but there are a lot of reasons why this move would make sense for Liverpool, and especially as we discussed in terms of all the other transfer activity that the club is going to do. maybe this sort of cheaper or sort of more cost-effective option might be the way to go forward for Liverpool.
Yeah, I think with such a big summer with positions needed all over the pitch, there's going to have to be sacrifice somewhere, and you do feel like maybe that will come at left back. And I mean, the Cuyper is a great option still. I mean, you spoke then about how effective he's been in the Champions League this season, and that's a really good test. I mean, that's sort of beyond the Premier League. That's the competition for Liverpool. That's what you want to be winning, and signing a player you know who can play well in that competition it has to be taken as a positive. And I mean, you spoke about maybe a more affordable option. He's valued by Football Transfers at around 15 million euros. So even if he does cost a little bit more than that, he's definitely sort of a lot cheaper than the other options that we've discussed. And again, this feels like a really opportunistic signing. Sort of, you've seen Liverpool do it before, where they sign players that everyone sort of thinks, oh, is that really a signing that is going to boost them to the top level? And it has worked time and time again. And you know, Liverpool have proven over the last decade that you don't need to go out and sign the most expensive, biggest name player in a position to make them go on and do really well. Andrew Robertson was signed for less than £10 million from a relegated Hull side, and he's gone on since then to be one of the best left backs in the world. I mean, there's absolutely nothing to say that this couldn't be a repeat of that. You know, you don't have to go out and get the most expensive, the biggest name player in this situation. You've got someone here who is proving that they can do it on the biggest stage in the Champions League. And like you said, I mean, just the distance covered alone makes you think that he's going to work well in a slot system. He's clearly a player that works hard. And I mean, he's only 24. So there's definitely loads of scope there for him to develop as a player, and for Slot to really be able to coach him into a talent that in a few years' time we could be looking back and saying, wow, Liverpool had such a bargain there. And actually, we've done that before. Why not do it again now?
For me, this kind of seems like the reason Liverpool brought back Michael Edwards, these kind of transfers, these kind of deals, because he is a player who I think statistically and stylistically is almost tailor-made for this slot system. If you're looking at the kind of fullbacks that Slot used at Feyenoord, it kind of makes sense for the Cuyper to be that option for Liverpool, because his all-around numbers are really good. Defensively, he's quite solid. He's very effective and very efficient going forward. So he will bomb up and down the pitch. And I think these kind of the kind of numbers that he's showing, his crossing ability, his dribbling ability, he's just kind of like an all-around, almost perfect left back. And he's obviously playing at a lot lower level than I think Milos Kerkez or Lewis Hall, maybe not Jorrel Hato, because I do think the Belgian Pro League is around or very similar to the Eredivisie. But at the same time, he is standing out a lot more than Kerkez or Hall is among his sort of left-back peers in the Jupiler Pro League. So Liverpool would be getting the standout player in that position, in that league. And obviously there will be question marks whether he can make the step up. But as I mentioned a few moments ago, these kind of decisions are why Liverpool brought in Michael Edwards. His data team should be able to predict whether he can make the step up. They've got a scouting team who will have sort of done their research when it comes to the Cuyper's every background, personality, or whatever that you need to know. So if Liverpool have done that research and have looked at the numbers and they believe he can make the step up, then I think I'm all for this move.
Yeah, definitely. You feel like, especially with Michael Edwards at the helm, Liverpool aren't making a signing off a whim. You know, we've seen that a few times from their Premier League rivals recently, where a signing's been made and maybe you think, oh, was that really what was best, what you needed in that position? But that isn't something that you see often at Liverpool. And not every Michael Edwards signing has been a 10 out of 10, but he has such an amazing track record. And you do have to feel, as a Liverpool fan, a lot more comfortable with him leading the operation. And I think that, I mean, like we both said, this just feels like a really good opportunity for Liverpool to go out and get someone who is performing at such a high level, but without maybe all of the media speculation and hype around them that I think also will put a lot of pressure on whoever comes in. I mean, Andrew Robertson's been one of the best in that position in the world for a number of years. Those are big shoes to fill. And if you're coming in for a huge price tag and you've got all those expectations on you, it will be difficult to transition. Whereas I think for a low transfer fee, someone who maybe not a lot is expected of them, if you bring them in, those conditions for them to thrive under Slot, who has already shown in less than 12 months that he can develop players and he can make the players that Liverpool have and the players that he inherited better. I mean, why wouldn't you want to just take a shot on a guy who's already performing really well?
And I think this kind of leads me onto Miguel Gutierrez, who is the last player that we're going to talk about. Gutierrez, again, is probably similar in the sense that maybe not every fan listening to this will have heard of him, but we did come across him in the Champions League this season when Liverpool faced Girona, and he kind of stood out I think the build up to the game. He was highlighted as one of the main threats for Girona, and I think in the game as well, he had a lot of positive moments going forward and defensively, where I thought, okay, like this, I can see why Liverpool would be interested. Now, he's a player who was developed at Real Madrid's academy, still very young, and he's been part of a Girona side who kind of been overperforming over the last couple of seasons in La Liga. And I think what really stands out to me is how far forward he plays as a left back. Like, he is a proper offensive fullback. If you look at his sort of heat maps, it will be the sort of hot spots will be very close to the opposition's penalty area, but you'll get the sort of orange spots in his own defensive half and in his own sort of defensive area as well. So that suggests to me, I don't have all the data, but it does suggest to me that he also does cover a lot of ground. And to me, again, he seems like a really nice fit for Liverpool, while and at the same time, Liverpool won't have to break the bank for him either.
Yeah, I mean, he is that. He definitely offers you a lot going forwards. Sometimes this season, he's almost looked more like a left midfielder than a left-sided fullback, and that is maybe a little bit different to what we see at Liverpool at the moment. Over the last 5 years, you've seen Trent almost blurring the line between right back and right midfielder, and it would be interesting to see that happen on the left-hand side. I mean, if Trent does go and you do bring in a more defensively minded right back, there's nothing to say that Liverpool shouldn't have a very attacking left-sided fullback. And I mean, he impressed me when we played them earlier on this season in the Champions League. Again, he's performing in the Champions League. He's performing for a Girona side that is defying all expectations, and he's valued at around 30 million euros by Football Transfers. So again, you feel like he's definitely a more affordable option. And we've seen players from Spain come over to the Premier League and absolutely tear it up. Like that step doesn't feel like as big a step as maybe with Cuyper from the Belgian Pro League or Hato from the Netherlands. You feel like he is almost ready-made and ready to take that step. And in what is going to be a summer full of change for Liverpool, maybe you do need to look at a player who's sort of already at that level and not someone who will need to be stepping up.
Yeah, I agree with all of those points. And I think we have to address the sort of elephant in the room, and that is the fact that Girona belong to the City Group, which, as we know, own Manchester City, among myriad of other clubs as well. So technically it wouldn't be signing someone directly from Liverpool's rivals, but it's pretty much basically the same thing. And we saw last summer, as exclusively revealed by Anfield Watch, that Liverpool tried to bring in Julian Alvarez. That didn't work out because Liverpool had different sort of valuations for Luis Diaz, who City wanted to bring in as a sort of swap deal for Alvarez to make the deal, I think, maybe publicly more acceptable for everyone involved. And I think I can sort of see City putting up a front here as well and preventing this deal from going through. They obviously would have first refusal on any sort of player from the City group. I don't necessarily think Manchester City need a left back, but they can definitely afford to just buy Gutierrez for however much Liverpool offer, just for the sake of it, because they are Manchester City. So I think this sort of brings a massive obstacle for Liverpool that I don't know if they can sort of jump over unless Manchester City are willingly just going to step aside and let it happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that we've really seen that much between Liverpool and Manchester City, but Manchester City have shown that they are willing to do business with rivals. I mean, Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko both going to Arsenal, who have then gone on to challenge City for titles. I don't think that sort of there is just an absolute rule at Manchester City that they will not sell players to rivals, or other teams in the City group won't sell players to rivals. So it doesn't make a deal impossible, but it definitely makes it interesting. I think a lot of it could come down to maybe what the player wants. If he knows that he would be starting at Liverpool, is that going to be more appealing than sitting on the bench at Manchester City behind Guardiola? There isn't a sort of clear spot for him at Manchester City, and maybe he'd be willing to wait at Girona and carry on playing in his homeland until maybe there is that spot available. But it definitely feels like an obstacle that Liverpool could overcome, whereas last summer they couldn't with Alvarez. You feel like maybe there is a bit more scope for this one, as it's not sort of direct between the two teams.
And now I'm going to ask you the most difficult question. We've gone through the 5 players that we think is sort of our shortlist for Liverpool in the summer. If you had to pick right now, well, obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Trent. We don't know what's going to happen with the forward situation. But if you had to pick right now, who would be your number one choice?
It is so difficult. And I mean, all of these players have clear quality because they wouldn't be linked with Liverpool if they didn't. I think I'm actually going to be difficult and say 2 names. I think Lewis Hall is the player who is closest to being the complete ready to step up and can just walk into this Liverpool side, and there won't need to be that bigger period of transition. And in a summer that's going to be full of change anyway, I think maybe he's the safest bet in terms of he has the Premier League experience. He's very similar to Andy Robertson profile-wise. You feel like there are going to be a lot of players this summer that Slot has to put in extra work with on the training ground to get them ready for Liverpool next year, and Lewis Hall might not be that. But I do think that in my heart of hearts, the opportunity to sign Hato this summer, I think he's going to be a generational talent. I think he'll be one of the best defenders in world football over the next decade, and his price is only going to go up, I think. So why not bring him in now and be able to mould him into the perfect player that you want? I think that he's definitely a player that if you were to say in 5 years' time he'll be playing for Real Madrid, not many people would be shocked by that statement. So maybe Liverpool should be proactive and go out and sign that generational talent now whilst they can, whilst the opportunity's there.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that, really. So, George, listen, thank you for your time. Really appreciated it. And thanks everyone for listening in. If you enjoyed this video, do make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, do check out all the great written content on Anfield Watch as well.